Okay, so let's take a look at how we can add in a timer to the project here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back up to the heads up display, and we now have one text box here. And let's call this, we'll call this ball count text. That way we know it's a text object. And then we're going to duplicate that, and you can just do Control W, and and for some reason it is not duplicating unless it duplicated it somewhere else. Oh, well, there it is. They all got duplicated on the side here, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this here, and I'm going to move that back up, and I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete this here as well. And we'll just add in a whole new text object here. Okay, so what we'll do is we will add in the size to content, and we'll call this, well, we'll just say, we'll give it maybe 20 seconds. Okay, so now we get to kind of see where the gameplay actually becomes important. So what do we want to do? How, do we want to give this player a timer? What is it that we want to do? Now we could spend a bunch of time any which way here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move this up here, and I think the timer is not as important as the ball count. So we'll just kind of move that up to the top here, and then I'm actually going to make this a bit bigger here at the bottom. Now, when you're designing a game, if you're designing for mobile, you have to understand, you kind of have to understand what, and by the way, I'm going to add in the anchor up at the top here. So you have to understand that people are on a smaller screen. Now, should you make a game ready for mobile and everything else? And that completely depends on your game. Now, you remember, you can always make a game that is not as important for mobile. You can make a game that doesn't go on mobile ever. There's nothing wrong with that. If your game and your audience of your game is not on mobile, making it for mobile is going to be a huge waste of time. This is one thing I wish someone told me. So I personally don't like mobile games as much as, let's say, console games or computer games. So I like to make those games more. And sometimes when I've released a game on PC or console, it's done a lot better than the mobile market space because it doesn't fit. Because if your control scheme in your game is not organic to mobile, then it's not going to work. No one's going to be happy, especially you. You'll be the least happy. And we'll call this, so let's call this timer text. So that way we know what it is. Okay, let's hop back into Unreal for a second, and let's go to our first person blueprints here, and then take up a first person character. Okay, let's add in a variable, and then we might as well make this, well, we can make it an integer for now. Well, let's actually make it a float. Okay, so the float here, and we'll call this timer. Timer variable. Okay. Sometimes if you're using a word that you might think is reserved, meaning that Unreal already uses it in some way, you can always put variable at the end of it. That's one thing I like to do. All right, so we got the variable here, and then we'll give the person 20 seconds, okay? If you really want, you can make another variable that gives you the start time, but in blueprints, that's not as important, okay? So now that we have this here, where is the best place to set up the timer here? Well, let's first of all go back to the blueprint here, and the ball blueprint, and we also have the count the balls, but the spawner blueprint here has this delay here. So what I'm actually going to do is literally copy this, okay, right? And we're gonna go into the level blueprint. Okay, so let's open the level blueprint here. And we already have something in here. And then we have the event begin play, and I'm just gonna paste it in here. So I'm gonna delay this here. And there's a couple things that we need to look at this. Okay, so first, actually, we need to completely um, get rid of this for the moment. I'm just going to bring this down. Okay, so first of all, let's test this. Um, Actually, let's just test this out right here. Okay, and we're not going to obviously spawn actor from Blueprint, but what we want to do is we want to change that variable. Okay, so in order to change that variable, we have to cast to first um, person character. Okay, and the object is going to be get player character, and there you go. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we are going to um, get the timer variable. Okay, and so and by get the timer variable, I mean set the timer variable. Okay, so the timer variable is going to be set. All right, so we now have this delay here, and we'll just make it this 0.2 seconds for the time being. Um, and then what this timer variable is going to do, actually what we'll do is we have to get, or let's go timer variable here, and we're going to get the timer variable. So we're going to get the timer variable, and then we're going to float, subtract, and we'll subtract 1 from it for now. Okay, and then we'll add it into the timer variable here. So there you go. The timer variable is going to be delayed every 0.2 seconds. We're just going to simply subtract 1 from it. Okay, and just to make it interesting, just because we're using a float, we might as well make 0.09. Now, a good tip with game design is that just because just because real time's in seconds, you think about a second is an arbitrary chunk of time. Like a second could be half as long. We just don't count them that way, right? So in some games, what they'll do is that in-game time is not actually in seconds. So, for example, if it reads 10 minutes in the in-game time, it's actually less than that because the in-game time is faster. And I've known some games, some really high-profile games, to do that, and that's something that's interesting that the game designers do. So, once I learned that, I'm like, okay, that could be something that I could add in my games. So now that we have that set, let's hop back into our heads-up display here, and let's hop back into our designer. So what we need to do now is let's go to our timer text here, and let's bind and create a binding. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that we have this get timer text 0, and then we have a return here. I'm going to go ahead and take that out. So if you look, for instance, we have the timer here, and we have the other one, which is get text 0. All we need to do is really cast to the first person character and get that variable. That's pretty much all we're doing. Okay, so let's cast to first person character, and then we're going to just add that in here. Get first person character, get character, get first character, and it's player character. Get player character. There we go. And as first person character, we're going to timer variable. We're going to get the timer variable, and all we're going to do is we're just going to drag. Not that. That would be interesting though, but we're just going to simply drag it in and make sure that you hook it up with the return node. Okay, so we're going to compile, and compile, so everything looks good, and save here, and then we might as well compile this blueprint, save, and while we're at it, we'll save all. Okay, and then while we're at here, we'll save all as well, and let's just see what happens. Okay, and then you can see what happens, once, and there's a couple problems. First, you see that it's a bit off screen, and second, you see that it's stopped. So let's deal with the first problem first. All right, so let's go to our heads up display, go back into the designer here, and we're gonna probably move this over just a bit so that we can kind of see everything here. Now the other thing that you can do is justify everything to the right. Okay, and that way it should work. So let's just save it and then test that again here. So that solves one of the problems, but you can see it's still off the screen. So let's go back into our designer here, and you can see that yeah, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to just essentially move this over here so that we can account for that. And we might, and I'm betting that the float here is going to have to be we're going to have to round it up as well. Okay, so let's save it here and let's play it. There you go. Okay, so first things first, well, things kind of, the rest of it works, but that timer doesn't work. So, well, at least we fixed one problem, and there's a couple other problems which I'll do in the next tutorial because this tutorial is already getting pretty long.